Okay, so we're diving deep today into Trumponomics.
Buckle up.
Yeah.
It's going to be a wild ride.
We've got articles, data galore.
We're trying to figure out
Right.
what was the deal with the U.S. economy during the Trump administration?
Was it all rosy?
Was it a disaster?
Or was it somewhere in between?
It's complicated, right?
It is complicated.
Yeah.
And we've got some seemingly contradictory policies happening all at once.
Right.
We've got tax cuts, but then we've got tariffs too, and then,
Deregulation.
but also potential labor shortages.
Yeah, it's a real puzzle. How does all this work?
Yeah, let's try to untangle it.
Okay.
Let's look at these policies one by one
All right.
and see how they all interacted.
Yeah.
Let's start with tariffs.
Okay.
So the idea was to protect American industries.
Right. By making those imports more expensive.
Okay, like a shield for American companies. But then wouldn't that make things more expensive for us?
For the consumer, right?
Yeah. For shoppers here?
Yeah, absolutely.
Like what?
Okay, so think about washing machines.
Huh.
When the Trump administration slapped tariffs on imported washing machine parts, the cost of those machines went up for consumers.
So is that what happened to prices?
That is a really good question, and it is something that economists debate, but it's definitely a factor, right? Those costs have to go somewhere.
Yeah, somebody's got to pay for it.
Exactly.
Ouch.
Right
Right in the wallet.
in the wallet.
Okay, so then there's the deportation policies.
Mm-hmm.
How do those actually impact the job market?
It's a tricky one because on one hand, fewer workers could mean higher wages for some workers, in theory at least.
Okay.
But on the other hand, you've got industries like agriculture or construction.
Yeah.
They rely heavily on immigrant labor,
Okay.
and they could really struggle if there aren't enough people to do the work.
So good for some,
Potentially.
but a pain for others.
A real headache.
Yeah, a real seesaw effect.
Yeah, it's a balance.
All right, let's talk about the tax cuts.
Okay.
I mean, everybody was talking about these tax cuts.
Yeah.
What was the real impact?
So the big one, the most significant change, was slashing the corporate tax rate from 35% down to 21%.
Wow.
Big change.
Huge.
And the idea was to get businesses to invest more,
Okay.
hire more, and be more productive.
So did it work?
Well, businesses did respond,
Okay.
but there's this debate
About?
whether it actually led to more jobs,
Right.
or if companies mostly just use that extra cash for things like stock buybacks.
Which helps who?
Mostly shareholders.
Okay.
Right.
Right.
And it's also worth noting that these cuts weren't really offset by spending reductions, so it really added to the national deficit.
Okay, so that's a problem.
Potentially, yeah, because it raises questions about long-term economic stability, you know? It's like taking out a loan to throw a party fund now, but you have to pay it back eventually.
Yeah, delayed gratification,
Fish out.
short-term gain. Question mark.
Question mark, exactly.
Okay, and then, of course, there's deregulation.
Can't talk about Trumponomics without talking about deregulation.
Yeah.
There was a huge push to reduce regulations,
Yeah.
particularly for businesses.
And less red tape means?
Less red tape can mean more dynamism,
Okay.
more innovation, in theory.
So less bureaucracy, more freedom to try new things.
Yeah, but there's always a but.
Yeah.
You need balance.
Okay.
Because without proper oversight,
Uh-huh.
deregulation can backfire.
Like?
Think about environmental protection or the financial markets.
Okay.
You loosen regulations on pollution.
Okay.
Some industries might benefit in the short term,
Uh-huh.
but what about the long-term damage to our environment?
Yeah, the air we breathe, the water we drink.
Exactly. Long-term consequences.
Okay, so it seems like everything we've talked about so far has positive and negative aspects.
That's the thing about Trumponomics, right? It's not a simple equation. You've got tax cuts, maybe boosting businesses, but then you've got tariffs potentially raising costs for consumers.
Right.
Did deregulation help or hurt? It all gets very messy.
Yeah, it's like a giant economic tug of war.
That's a great way to put it.
So with all this going on, what happened to overall economic growth?
Well, that's where things get really interesting.
Okay.
Remember that idea of secular stagnation
Yeah.
that was floating around during the Obama administration?
Yeah, like slow economic growth was inevitable.
Right, like it was just unavoidable due to things like an aging workforce.
Okay.
But then under Trump, the economy actually saw decent growth,
Illinois.
even with all these seemingly contradictory policies in play.
So maybe slow growth isn't unavoidable. Maybe it's just influenced by whatever policies are happening at the time.
Exactly, and that's why Trumponomics is such a fascinating case study.
Yeah.
It really challenges a lot of the conventional thinking about economic policy. You've got policies that, in isolation, might seem like they'd promote growth, but then they're combined with other policies that might hinder growth, and it all interacts in unpredictable ways.
Yeah.
It really highlights the complexity of these systems.
It's complicated.
It is.
So if somebody asks, was Trumponomics good or bad?
The honest answer is it depends.
Depends on what?
It depends on what you value most, how you measure success.
Okay.
Some people might point to the GDP growth during that time, the job creation,
Uh-huh.
as signs that things were going well.
Okay.
But others might focus on the growing national deficit or the potential long-term consequences of deregulation, and they might see those as reasons for concern.
Yeah, so no easy answers here.
Not at all.
It's all about weighing the pros and cons and considering those long-term impacts.
Exactly.
Like a giant economic puzzle, you got to look at all the pieces to see the full picture.
Absolutely.
So here's something to ponder. If some of these policies seem to contradict each other, was it all part of some master plan? Or was it just a lack of a coherent strategy? That's something to think about as you learn more about the world of Trumponomics.
Good question.
Thanks for joining us for this deep dive
Of course.
into Trumponomics.
See ya.
See ya.
Bye.
Bye.